another Yesshift episode. I'm Steven Schinder, and this is another Steven's, well, it's kind of a hybrid thing, this one, Steven's Venue Adventures and Steven's Vinyl Adventures. Like I mentioned before, I went to see Spock's Beard at Alvas Showroom. This would have been their third show out of the three shows they played there. This was Monday, February 2nd, and I heard someone at the show, who I guess had been there the previous night, say that the third night was the best one. So I'm glad I was able to make it to that one. It really worked out for me, and I won't say the set list until the very end, just in case they maybe will do the same set over in Europe in the near future, and people might want to be surprised. But yeah, when I first found out about these shows, it was around the time back in December, I think, when Dad interviewed Ted Leonard, and there was a mention of the Alvas Showroom shows and how the first two nights were sold out. And so I was able to get a ticket for the third night before those ran out. But yeah, if you've been following the show and you know what was going on back in December, you know why I had to sit that interview out. But it was a good conversation between Ted and Dad. And we're actually having Nick Potters for an interview on Drum Talk TV later this month. That'll be on February 25th at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. UK time. So follow Drum Talk TV on Facebook and YouTube, and you'll be able to see that interview when it broadcasts live. And I actually got to talk to Nick a bit here, but I'll get to that. So I arrived at this show, and without really having done any preparation, listening to Spock's Beard other than this new album, the Archaeoptimist, which I'll show a slideshow of pics of that. I also have my copy here in my lap. And I'm sure I've listened to some of their earlier stuff, like really early, because at some point I had the intention of going through their entire discography, but got sidetracked by other stuff. But yeah, I've heard some of their early stuff, and for sure this newer album, which came out a few months ago. And this album, The Archaeoptimist, it's incredible. It's prog, and it feels now. It's one of my favorites from this past year. So before the show began, I went to the merch stand, and there they had t-shirts, a poster, CDs. I think there might have been some video release. There was a Rio solo album, I believe, and this album, The Archaeoptimist, was available in black vinyl and red vinyl. I was able to get the red one. They were about the same price, $30. And I'll go ahead and show you the slideshow here. And this is a really great album. I'll talk about the music in a bit. I've probably talked a bit about it on a different episode, but you know, having listened to this vinyl record now this morning, I want to give it its due once again if I already have. So this was before the show. I had the vinyl in its plastic. And do I go this way? Yeah, there's a hype sticker, Spock's Beard, The Archaeoptimist, limited edition red vinyl. Prog rock legends Spock's Beard arrive on Madfish with the new album, The Archaeoptimist. And yeah, I believe the Madfish Bandcamp is where this you one of the places you can find this, or even go to that website that's listed there, madfishmusic.com, see what they got. So this is one of the records, well, the LPs rather. It's a double LP set. So side A has Invisible and Electric Monk. Side 2 has Aforethoughts and Saint Jerome in the Wilderness. That's side D. Side C has the Archaeoptimist Part 1, and side D has the Archaeoptimist Part 2, and then Next Step. Now, the title track is a 20-minute epic, and the rest of the tracks are usually, I guess, comparatively lengthy compared to some of the stuff you hear on the radio. The shortest one here, other than Archaeoptimist Part 2, is, I believe, Electric Monk at 6 minutes, 16 seconds. And the final track is actually almost 11 minutes long, Next Step. But yeah, because of vinyl, I guess they had to split the Archaeoptimist into two parts. So you get the first almost 17 minutes, or the first four parts of the epic, because there are like parts 1 through 7, and then you get the final three parts on the reverse side, which is 4 minutes and 14 seconds. I do kind of wonder if maybe it could have been divided a bit earlier in the track, maybe after this time skip that happens before part 3 in the story. And there is context for the story in the Archaeoptimist here in the liner notes. But yeah, let me actually go through some more of this slideshow. So okay, that's how it looks in the black sleeve thing. And you also have the backside. So Ryo Okamoto, who's the keyboardist, produced it. And I actually had seen Ryo perform with Project at this venue, the Alvas Showroom, last summer. So this was my second time seeing him there. Mixed and mastered by Rich Mauser, album art by Carl Glover for Aleph Studio. And of course, you got Ted Leonard on lead vocals and guitar, Alan Morse on guitars and vocals, Ryo, like I mentioned, on keyboards, Dave Morose on bass, and Nick Potters on drum and vocal. Yeah, in the live show, he had a microphone, so he contributed to the Spock's beard vocal harmonies and did an amazing job. He's the youngest in the band. At some point, I think Ted made a comment about how Nick brings the average age of the band down a bit. You got the track list there. The inside, when you open this thing up, you get the lyrics on two different sides. And there's my signed copy, got signed by Ryo, Ted, and Nick. I'll talk about that in a bit. That's the stage with the instruments before the show started. And this is just as the show is ending and people were making their way out. People might think I'm weird for this, but I don't really have that much of a habit of anymore of taking pictures and videos so much during concerts, because I worry about obstructing people's views, or I want to be in the moment when I watch these things. There might be times here and there where I'll try to do a bit more, but yeah, I just want to sit there, be in the moment during this thing. But let's talk about this album. It's got really high energy. It, in some ways, feels like it harkens back in some places to Emerson, Lake and Palmer, or even a bit of early King Crimson with some of the heaviness of the material. Ryo has that awesome Hammond sound throughout this thing. It's really great. It's like prog is still alive and well. I see in the comments Michael Burns tuning in from Facebook saying Spokane into house. Okay, so you're tuning in from Spokane, Washington, I'm assuming. So they really begin this album with a bang with Invisible and those opening vocals that really draw you in. And Electric Monk is like a great track to follow that as well. Aforethoughts, in parentheses, it says Thoughts Part 4. That has such memorable, like, vocal harmonies, like time before time. Like, there's some great vocal harmonies on this thing. Saint Jerome in the Wilderness, you also got the catchy reunited, rejoined, reassembled, restored, that whole bit. And like I mentioned, the Archaeoptimist, it's very much a narrative, and you get the context here within these. Like, you have the lyrics, but it also has a couple sections at the top of parts 1 and 3 and 4 about like what's going on in the narrative of the story. So I'm just going to read the one for part 1 just so I don't want to just paraphrase it. I want people to really be drawn in. A cataclysmic pole shift momentarily halted the Earth's rotation while relentless winds and turbulent oceans continued their ceaseless dance. The vast majority of land masses vanished beneath the embracing seas, leaving civilizations buried in the abyss of mud. Only those nestled in landlocked, high-altitude refuges survived the onslaught. This tale follows two members of a resilient tribe of survivors, a father and his daughter. Born after the cataclysm, the daughter's understanding of the old world comes solely from the whispered tales shared around the flickering fireside. Through ancestral stories, she glimpses echoes of lost glory, igniting her imagination amidst the shadows of a changed world. So this is very much a post-apocalyptic father-daughter story. We've had some of those types of stories, like The Last of Us kind of fits that mold. That's a really good show and game. I've never played the game, but watched the show finally recently, and it's really cool. And it also reminds me of, recently I watched the latest 28 Years Later movie, and you have characters there who were either too young or not even born during the like times before the apocalypse. And so you have that here, and the daughter has this curiosity about the old world. So this is a really bombastic epic. Part 3 kind of begins with a shift in tone. You get a little bit of funk at the start of it, but then it gets closer to the feel of the rest of this. When the side C is ending, and it kind of has to cut off that bit of this epic because part of it is on the other side. It does have kind of a cool down, and then when you turn it to the other side, it starts up again right away. But yeah, I was kind of curious about that because I was under the impression that each side of an LP could have 24 minutes of music. So I was wondering why they couldn't have all of the Archaeoptimist on side C and then have the 11-minute next step on side D. I don't know if it has to do with the material. Maybe someone who's more of an expert on vinyl could clarify some of that for me. But yeah, either way, I'm still glad to have this on vinyl, and it sounds really great. I see in the comments, it says, hello from Germany. On the 10th of February, I go to Spock's Beard in Hamburg. Okay, nice. Yeah, I don't know if you heard the beginning of this broadcast, but at the end of this, and I'll give a warning beforehand, I'll say what the set list was, so you can tune out before that portion in case you want to be surprised. But what I will say without spoiling is that the setlist does have a nice balance between new stuff from this album and as well as stuff from some of their previous albums. And of course, like I mentioned, Next Step is the 11-minute closer, a really great conclusion to the whole thing. And you got the special thanks listed here as I'm looking at the thing. Yeah, like it was really great revisiting this album and also getting to hear some of it performed live. At some point, Rio was doing like this chopping motion on the keyboards. It was a lot of fun. There was a moment where everyone except for Nick left the stage because Nick got to do a drum solo spot, and then everyone came back, and yeah, that was a fun moment. They even before the encore or before the final song of the normal set, they're like, all right, we only got one more song and we're totally not gonna hide behind the curtain and then come back as if because he demanded it. Like, we all know how this works, right? Which I think this happened at the project show I went to last summer as well, where the band is like, yeah, we know we're gonna come back for the encore. That's how this whole thing works. So and the host there was really proud to have had prog artists at this thing and to have gotten back into prog. Apparently he was a Gentle Giant fan. So there's that nice little bit before the show started. Ted also apparently might have caught something. So he was apparently like dealing with something in with his throat or whatever, but he like if we had not seen him, like, you know, he had to take something in between one of the songs, I would not have noticed that he was in top form with the singing. And you know, when I talked to him later, he was like, because I told him that this was the only Spock's Beard show I've ever seen, and he said he wished he was in more top form. And in my head, I'm thinking, what is he talking about? It sounded great, but I totally get it. You know, I've done improv, you know, in workshops and on the stage and stuff, and there are sometimes here and there when I haven't felt my best, you know, if I feel like I was like dealing with something, like if I had a sore throat or something and my improv choices didn't feel as satisfying as it would normally be, but someone afterward would tell me, hey, you were great, and I'd be like, really? So I do kind of get it. John Costello, Spock's Beard, never quite. Okay, how much Spock's Beard have you listened to, John? I'm curious. Yeah, because I definitely need to catch up on their back catalog. I definitely want to. I heard someone say that this new album feels like some of the earlier stuff, but again, I don't have enough of a frame of reference for all of that. The songs that they performed that were not from this album, it did feel like the new songs and the old songs felt like they very well could have been from the same album. Like, the energy was great, the pacing, all that. So yeah, like that was something that really stood out to me during this performance. So I guess I could talk about like when the show ended, you know, went to the a table where a couple of the members were signing stuff. You know, Rio came out there first, and I told him that this was the first Spock's Beard show I'd seen, and he asked me like how long have I known about them, and I told him, you know, I'd listened to a bit of the older stuff, but you know, very more aware of them the last few years, and and really got familiar with this new album. So yeah, there were a couple other people who said it was their first show, and Rio was like, "Wow, there are a bunch of first timers here." And there's also the kid. I think his name was Sonny. So that was really fun moment there. Um, seemed very excited to be there. And Ted then got out to the table, and I told him that I mentioned who I was, and that Dad interviewed him, and we talked a little bit about that. And yeah, he's like these guys were like really kind and very generous with their time and signing the stuff. Nick Potter's uh, like came to the area, and we talked quite a bit, like for like several minutes at least, because it's talking about how it feels very weird when people go up and praise the players, because him along with the players, because it's like there's kind of a disconnect there. And I was also saying, you know what, I feel kind of weird like praising people, like I'm even when I'm super impressed with what a person has performed, it still feels weird having the words coming out of my mouth like that praising them. And yeah, we had a great convo. He talked about how he told me and a couple other people who were there about how he got the Spock's beard gig, and how I guess Nick DiVirgilio was aware of him and reached out to him. And we're actually having Nick DiVirgilio on for a Drum Talk TV interview next week, I believe. Let me double check when that is, just in case anyone wants to tune into that. So this would be on Monday, February 9th, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So he'll be talking about the new Big Big Train album, Woodcut, which comes out this Friday, I believe. There have been singles, but the full album will be out. And yeah, Nick Potter's also said that the set list was the same for each of the three shows, and he talked about how like in the past, like on Cruise to the Edge or something, he got kind of thrown kind of a surprise thing when he was told, "Hey, learn this song. We're gonna have Jimmy Keegan sing this," and something like that happened with and Nick DiVirgilio guesting as well for something. Like it's a really funny thing. But yeah, and he's Nick Potter's really fits well with the band. He is able to keep up, and I'm really excited to see what more he can contribute to the band. And this is me speaking as someone who's only who's most familiar with the new album and really needs to go back through the back catalog as well to fill in those puzzle pieces. John Costello says, been to one at Spock's Beard Show, didn't stay for all of it. Maybe I'd like the new album. The Star Trek episode they got their name from is great. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, love Star Trek. Yeah, apparently they don't play many shows in the US. I guess there are some logistical reasons, and maybe there's like the cost of touring and traveling, and maybe for them it makes more sense to have a limited number of shows here and do stuff in Europe. So I don't know. I don't know the final details, but that's kind of the sense that I got from a couple things that I read that were in my feed. So I was really fortunate to be able to make it to this one, all things considered. They could have done this 3-show run anywhere in the US, and I was close enough to it. So yeah, I'm glad that I was able to make it to that. All right. So I guess with that, oh, at the signing, um, like I mentioned, Rio, Ted, and Nick signed the album for me, but one of the people in line was Adam Sears from Lobate Scarp, a good friend of me and Dad and of the show. And yeah, a few years ago, we interviewed him on Yesshift about that Lobate Scarp album, You Have It All, which had Billy Sherwood and John Davison on it. And I got to see Lobate Scarp perform 3 years ago here in LA. And yeah, like he was wearing a Cruise to the Edge shirt, and we were talking about like Cruise to the Edge and stuff. And he was like, "You should go sometime." And yeah, like I would love to go. I just don't know when slash if that could be in the cards. But yeah, it was really cool to see Adam there. And I think there might be a couple picks I still need to show from this slideshow. Let me just make sure. Okay, I have a pic of Rio at the table. I'll show that real quick. Okay, so there's Rio at the table, and Rio and Ted and a few other people gathered around. So yeah, like I said, keep an eye out for Nick Potters when he gets interviewed on Drum Talk TV in a few weeks on February 25th. So that should be a really great conversation. I feel like I've heard some of what might end up in that conversation, so we'll see what he and Dad end up talking about. But yeah, cool guy. He really fits well with the band, and looking forward to seeing what more he does in music. All right, so now comes the part where I talk about what's in the set list. So if you don't want to be spoiled, if you're going to see Spock's beard in Europe, just in case this ends up being the same set list, it very well could. You can tune out now before I say what it was. But all right, so you got your warning. So here's the set list. The set list, like I said, was really balanced between old and new Spock's Beard material. They played 9 different songs, and it felt like all the even numbered ones were from this new album. So that's a great balance right there. I'm always saying, promote the new album at these things. Don't just showcase the old favorites, showcase the new stuff. And they very well did that, which is great. They began the show with At the End of the Day, which is kind of ironic. I think that's from their 5th album, from what I read. Then they played Invisible, of course, the opening track from this new album. Then Crack the Big Sky, and then back to a new song, Electric Monk. And then On a Perfect Day, which they said was from their self-titled album, which was actually their 9th album. They said 9 as in the number, not the word, and then they played the Archaeoptimist epic, 20-ish minutes, really amazing. And people were clapping throughout this show, and really impressed. And then they played Walking on the Wind, and then they played the closing track from the album, Next Step. And people were like giving like a standing ovation type thing. And of course, when they came back for the encore, they played something from their debut album. It was a track called Go the Way You Go. A really awesome way to close the show. 9 amazing pieces, some of them pretty lengthy, and it was amazing. A cool concert to begin the year with. So I guess I'll have to see what my next one is. I very well could possibly be going to someone with friends in the near future. We'll have to see what's going on there. But Yeah, I feel like these last few years I've had kind of a nice streak of, great picks for first shows of the year. I think Lobate Scarp was even in one of those first shows of one of those years. So I think that'll do it for this particular episode. And like I said, check out the new album, The Archaeoptimist. It's new prog. It feels like it has elements of some of the classic stuff we like, but it also feels very now, very with it. It's high energy, very bombastic. It's great. Um, yeah, I don't know if I can do enough justice with everything I've said about it, but yeah, it's that good. Definitely check it out. All right. So next time I'm on Yesshift will probably be Saturday, February 7th. I'm aiming for noon Pacific. That's when I'll talk about Asia live at the Budokan 1983. I've had the box set for a while. I've checked out the formats other than the vinyl because I didn't get a record player until within these last couple of years, and I'm finally gonna get around to talking about the vinyl version of that. So that should be a fun one, and we'll see what happens next. All right. And like I said, Symphonic Live, I'll talk about that at some point this month. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, everyone. So go listen to some Spock's Beard or some other prog music. There's some great stuff out there. And we'll see you all soon. Bye.